Welcome, everyone, to the R.E.S.T podcast, where our goal is to help each and every one of you displace confusion, chaos, and dis-ease in order to heal and find significance in life. I am your host, Natalie Williams, and I am here with the author of The Reconstitution Method for Healing and Rest, Virginia Dixon.
Thanks, Natalie.
Hi, how are you?
Good. I'm exceptionally happy to be here today.
As am I.
We have a special guest.
Yes, we do. Today, we have someone very special to me to continue the discussion about seasons of life. He's not only one of Virginia's clients, but is also my dad, Jaycee Williams. Hi, Dad.
How you guys? Yes.
Glad you're here. It's fun.
It is fun because they say, conventional thinking, I should say, is you shouldn't work with your friends.
Right.
And you certainly shouldn't work with the husband and the wife separately unless you're working with them together. Mm-hmm, and there's all these you shouldn't do's. And here at R.E.S.T, it's all about building community and working together to understand or achieve deeper levels of understanding of what it is to live whole. And so we kind of break all those rules since we don't diagnose, treat, or cure. And we do things in a little bit of an unconventional way. We're about,
rebels.
Yeah. We're
That's
about
why I'm
education.
here.
Yeah. But it's been a joy to work with Natalie. And I know you know this, Jay. We've talked about this before. But Natalie was my client first.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then she said, can you talk to my mom and my dad? And so it's been such a joy to see your family just blossom. If we could take a model of this and multiply it all over the country, we would heal the hemorrhaging heart of a nation like that.
Absolutely. I really believe that. And it's funny, too, because I was the proverbial donkey when I was first exposed to this idea, right? You know, you kind of have everybody has like an idea about how life should go. And obviously, we only do what we know when we know what we learn. But what if you've learned the wrong thing for many years, right? And so I just kind of thought, oh, yeah, that's one of those psychological things. And I really don't need that, right? I'm good right where I'm at. But when I saw the outcome of my daughter and just the blossoming that had happened with her, wait a minute. You know, that's a head scratcher. Let's check this out. And then obviously my wife, who, by the way, I married up, is just phenomenal.
You're both wonderful.
Yeah. And I started seeing her blossom too. I thought, okay, it's my turn. Right?
Yeah.
And so, but it was making the decision to do that. But when you asked me to come in today, I'm thinking, who am I that I would even have a story to tell? Right.
Well, you're the product of R.E.S.T, and you showed up. You were very skeptical. I remember the first time I met you. And I remember the very first conversation we had. I thought, Jay, your brain is exhausted.
Yeah.
Can we just do a little evaluation to see what's going on up there?
It was a dissecting.
Not quite, but I'll never forget when I encouraged you to consider Cereset.
Yes.
So that we could calm down the frequencies and then we could start with from a little bit of a more peaceful place. And the thing is, you just showed up and you took everything in. You were skeptical. You were verbal about your skepticism.
Yes.
But
electroshock. I thought, I'm thinking, I'm so messed up, they're going to put me under electroshock. I'm going to be, the experiment here.
That's funny.
But was I wrong?
Well, it's been such a joy, and I'm so happy you're here.
Yeah.
I love your transparency. I love your authenticity. I like your integrity. I respect your integrity.
Thank you.
And I think you have a humble, tender heart, but I know it didn't come easy. We've been discussing seasons of life, and I don't want to recap everything because I know you're going to have a lot to say, but you, like so many people I work with, grew up in what felt like a little bit of a war zone. Yeah. And a lot of confusion and chaos and dis-ease at home. And you were kind of on your own a little bit to learn how to plant and learn how to train and all that. So I just wanted people to hear your testimony.
Yeah, I was actually completely on my own, really. Even though my dad was a hard worker, right? And my mom stayed at home pretty much all the time. It was kind of like I was there, but I wasn't there. And so I kind of had to do things on my own. You know, it felt like to me, right? Now, they might have a different perspective, obviously.
Yeah.
Right? But for me, it was like, I got to learn this on my own. And I did. Just lived a basic, normal life, growing up in Southern California, best you can, right?
Right.
But actually pretty spoiled if you look back at it. But really not having the support that I think I probably would have needed. But just realizing at a real age, I had realized to see that I needed to do this on my own, and I did. And part of it, I think, was really good for me, because I didn't have to rely on anybody. I could figure it out for myself that, look, you can do this.
Mm-hmm. Well, you had the can-do attitude for sure. Mm-hmm. But tell me what those early years looked like specifically. Where did it lead you in high school and whatnot, and college, and what did life become, and why and how, and what choices did you make that were painful and hard and maybe not the best choices, but that narrative of being kind of in this battlefield continued for a long time for you?
Yeah, it's funny because I found acceptance outside the home, obviously, because it didn't really feel like it was there. Even though my parents loved me, it wasn't really expressed verbally, and definitely not by my dad. It was just kind of a painful place to be. So when I started going to school, I started hanging out with people who seemed interested in me. Right, took an interest in me. So, and that would have been the drug group, right? The experimental group. And in the 70s, that was a big deal.
Yeah, a family. It became a pseudo family.
Yeah. But you also need to know your limitations too. So that was part of the wisdom I gathered from the group I was with. That those things could be experimented with, but not necessarily so far that they put you under.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Some people never recover from that experience.
I actually have friends still that have never recovered from that.
Yeah.
And I'm in my early 60s. And so, it's amazing to see that they're kind of stuck at 15, And
that whole culture becomes an escape. The whole community becomes an escape.
Yeah.
And that's where you find comfort, is in that community and in escaping reality, right?
Right. Exactly.
So you got into drugs at a young age, a little bit.
Experimental and entrepreneurial.
Yes.
So I was able to create a little bit of cash doing that too. But it was all fleeting, right? It was all, I found early that it was pretty much kind of meaningless. But I kept in it because it was the only people that really cared about me. And so by the time I was 16, I had realized I needed to just be away from home. And what I did was, I found a car that I wanted. My parents wouldn't buy it for me, even though they had the funds to do it. My dad, which was really good for me, actually said, "You need to go earn it." And so I did. I went down to local. At that time, it was the gas stations. You actually was full serve, right? So I had made friends with the owner. His name was Lanny Monroe, and he owned a Shell station, and he hired me to work there. And I just cleaned windows and checked the oil and pumped the gas. That's all I did. And I earned the money all summer. All my friends were off out playing, and I worked all summer, earned the money for that car.
Did you get away from the drug culture?
I did. It actually took me away from it. Yeah, I did.
So you bought your first car.
I bought my first car, which really bring my freedom, right? It's funny because today's youth, some of them don't even have a driver's license, and they're in their 20s.
Yeah.
But for us, it was like, oh man, that's my freedom. Let me out. And that's exactly what happened. And once I got my car, I was pretty much moved out.
Yeah.
Okay.
I had my stuff at the house, but that would be about it. I'd come home and do my laundry, but I was gone. I was living with some college guys. We were just basically free. And at that point is when the experimental part became a little increased. And,
so what looked like freedom really was leading you into deeper bondage, though, right?
Absolutely.
Right. So it looked like freedom, but
it looks like freedom, but it isn't.
It isn't.
It's
we
not.
often talk about principles of liberty, which is decisions of conscience, right? The function of the soul. And I'm all about this.
Yeah.
And helping people understand that that's really the seed of freedom is what you do with your conscience. And you're getting deeper into this idea of freedom, but you realized in short order it wasn't freedom.
It's total bondage.
Because you're total bondage,
Yeah. And that's exactly what happened when I did complete high school. Right. I almost quit my senior year, like halfway through. And the counselor knowing that I was a good student, right, and I had really good grades, called me into the office. I'll never forget it. And she said, "What blank are you doing?" and I just said, "Well, I'm kind of tired of school." And she said, "Look, you're going to quit on your last year. You're right at the finish line, and you're going to quit." And it really woke me up. And so I finished.
Yeah, because when we get tired, when life feels like everything's a fight and we're on our own, we do get tired and we do get weary.
Yeah.
And we think, okay, I'm exhausted. And we think that's going to bring us freedom and peace, but it took you deeper into a darker place. So what happened from there?
I graduated, and the very next day, I already had an apartment set up in San Clemente, California, and I moved in with some friends. During that whole time, obviously was dating different girls here and there, and that's really where the pain came in a lot of times and I wore my heart on the sleeve. I still kind of do, right?
Yeah.
But I was engaged to a girl, and she actually had got kicked out of her house, so she was living with me and my best friend. And at that point, one weekend when I had taken off with some other friends, I came home early and had caught them together. That was lots of pain, because not only was it my fiance, but it was my best friend, right?
Yeah.
And so that just kind of
That's shocking.
Sent me in a tailspin, and I actually lost my job at the same time because I couldn't function. I couldn't even go into work, right?
Well, it kind of reinforces these family patterns of being on your own and not being able to really fully trust people.
Well, feeling
and
abandoned.
So it's abandoned. And so it's reinforced in love, young love and all that. It's a pretty dark place. And what happened from there?
Well, I basically stayed in my apartment for 2 weeks until a friend of mine came and kind of rescued me. We went the way of the weed, and the Kolk, and so I kind of dove back into that whole
drug culture,
the whole drug culture there. And in the midst of that, I had a friend that I went to high school with that he went to Hawaii. Right. And as a surfer, that's one of the places you want to go. So he asked myself and another friend of mine if we would come over for a few weeks and spend some time with him. I didn't have any friends, right? Or that friend, my best friend anymore. And my fiance was gone. So it was like, what the heck? Why not? So I did. I left for 2 weeks and stayed 5 years.
Wow. 2 weeks, 5 years.
Well, when I landed over there, it was just an amazing place. He was living in Waikiki. He was what they call a beach boy, which is like a guy on the beach that, rents and sells chairs and puts lotion on the ladies and does surf lessons and things like that.
Parasailing.
And all kinds of stuff, all kinds of great stuff. He asked me if I wanted to stay and do that. I said, absolutely. My mom raised no fool. Right. So, but Hawaii in the 80s.
Right. Yeah.
So it was absolutely phenomenal.
Like I said, we've been discussing seasons of life, and you just covered your early childhood, your adolescence, your high school experiences, and now you're
all
kind of interest.
Yeah, all on my own.
And it seems like there were some things internally that were spiraling down, even though outwardly it looked like you were free.
Right.
Inwardly, you're kind of crumbling a little bit. What was the turning point in Hawaii?
Well, when we're out and about like that, we tend to get hurt even more, right? And I was already a wounded soldier, pretty much, right? So I kind of stayed in that whole scene over there for quite a while. And I actually ended up living on the Big Island for a little over a year.
There was a specific incident, a specific situation that Natalie referenced yesterday or the day before yesterday.
Oh, yes, in Hawaii.
Did this in Hawaii.
Yes.
So that's a significant traumatic.
That was.
So I want to say this, that when inadvertently we grow up with a measure of chaos and we're not adequately attached to our loved ones, to community, and we find and develop these alternative communities to hang with. And in your case, it was kind of acceptance, exactly. And it was a drug culture of some sort, some casual, some more serious. But it continued. And whenever you had that crisis situation here before you left California, that sent you into this tailspin and you left to Hawaii. But I wanted you to share with our listening audience how this specific incident, one of the specific instances besides the betrayal of this girl and whatnot, that was really a deep wound. It was a big wake-up call for you. And the reason this is important, I want you to tell that story, is because we don't realize when we have this measure of chaos in our lives that it's like life feels like a battle. Everything feels like I'm waiting for the next shoe to drop.
Well, and it's not just that, but it's the fact of, like, Dad talked about it from when he was young and living in a home that had chaos. And you didn't mention this, but your parents did end up getting divorced.
Yes, they did.
Yeah, and so it's that measure of chaos growing up with it. You grow up with this normality, like this is normal. This is life. This is what everyone's going through, which is where that can-do attitude, like, well, if everyone else is experiencing this and this is normal, then, and if everyone else can do it, then of course I can do it.
I need to put on my big boy panties and just go do it.
Yeah, exactly.
But there was that specific instance in Hawaii that I think was a real wake-up call.
Yeah, it really was, because,
what happened?
He was a great friend. His name was Moa. He was from the island of Tonga. He was probably one of the friendliest guys you'd want to meet, right? But he also was involved with marijuana. And at that time, I was dealing a lot of it, right? And making a lot of money, right? I was working the beach, so I'd see the tourists. They'd approach me or whatever. And so there was a lot of that going on at that time, right? Specifically, I remember Moa, he would go and pick up for me sometimes. He had met some characters, and from what I understand, they were actually on the run from the police from San Diego, and they had landed in Waikiki, and they wanted some marijuana. And so I sent Moa with it to go there to deliver it. I'm not really positive exactly what happened, but they ended up throwing him off the balcony 5-story from the hotel room that they were staying at, and obviously they killed him.
You thought he was just making a delivery?
Yeah, well, he was, right? Yeah. But I don't know what happened with what went on in the room. But next thing I heard, he had died, right? And so obviously they got caught. They went to jail, but it doesn't make anything change.
What was that like to get that news?
You feel
Where were you?
Responsible. You feel, well, I felt responsible, right?
Where were you? When you got the call? Do you remember?
I do not.
Yeah, trauma. It was traumatic.
Yeah. And that's the wonderful thing about coming to Christ.
Yeah.
Because you can alleviate all that trauma. You can let it go if you're willing to, right?
It's really interesting because it's unprompted, but you're the third person that mentioned faith and the transformative power of faith and really helping you cope with all these seasons of life. And in your case, being very much on your own.
Yeah.
When it all hits you at once, it's hard to know what to do. You feel like you're drowning.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
How did that death impact you, and what happened in short order?
I pretty much stopped dealing. I still used marijuana a little bit, but not really as much. But I stopped. I stopped that lifestyle. I saw that there's problems here, right?
Yeah. Isn't that interesting how we have to get hit like with a 2x4 to wake up?
Yeah.
It's like,
sometimes.
Why?
Not all the time. There's a lot of red flags leading up to that, but then if we don't listen.
But when we grow up and all we know how to do is be on our own and fight, and the terrain of life can be very scary, and it's got a lot of complexities that we don't always know how to navigate.
Full of characters.
It's like you said, you don't even know. You don't know until something shocking like that happens. Sometimes, yes, your conscience is pierced. You see you're kind of doing the wrong thing, but like you said, Natalie, you're so used to chaos that it's normal.
Right. Yeah. But it does take the traumatic things like that to really wake you up. At least it did for me.
Yeah, that's incredible. So what happens? You come back to the States.
Yeah, so I got the opportunity to come back from my brother and be the best man and stuff. And I had planned on going back. I was just going to go back and live my life. I mean, I had a great job as a lifeguard on a parasail platform. Yeah.
But the death of your friend was a real turning point. So you come back home, you went to your brother's wedding.
Right.
And what became of life? How did you get where you are? Because now you have this beautiful family. You have a beautiful home in Southern California. You mentor people and help them accomplish their dreams. Tell me how you got there.
Well, once I found out that the girl that I had changed my lifestyle for, I'd left Hawaii for, I'd came back to California for, really didn't want me, right? And so there was another level of rejection that was there. And here's where grace really comes in. Remember the relationship with my best friend and the original one?
Yeah.
I ended up moving back in with him after I came back.
Wow.
He was still my best friend. So you and he
reconciled.
We reconciled. He actually was at the airport for me when I came in.
Wow.
He probably felt horrible.
Oh, he felt terrible. Are you kidding? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And him and the girl had a child and been divorced.
Oh.
Right? Because I guess she did it too.
Oh,
gosh. But
if
I loved him.
somebody's cheating on somebody else while they're with you, they're probably going to cheat on you with somebody else.
Again.
Yeah.
Unless they can heal from what ails them.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Because there are those transformative moments when you realize, what am I running from? And these transformative experiences can change the trajectory of your whole life.
Yeah.
But your friend apparently completely went the other direction, but she continued to.
Yeah, do what she did. Yeah.
Just curious, was he humble?
Extremely.
Extremely humble.
Yeah.
And apologetic.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So it was through that.
When there's repentance, there's redemption. Mm-hmm. If there's no repentance, redemption is impossible. It's a law of nature.
Yeah.
Years ago, as a side note, my daughter called me from a public phone in New York. Many years ago. Tells you how many years ago that was. And she was crying. And she informed me that her fiance was looking for rings. He wanted to take her out looking for rings. And she was crying. And she said the nature of the wounds that he's inflicted during the course of our relationship, love the family, they loved her, this whole thing, but have been so severe and so significant. And she said, and here I'm supposed to be, I should be happy picking out my wedding ring. But you know what, Mom? I just realized something. She said, he never said, I'm sorry. I've wounded you. I've hurt you. And she said, I've got this gaping hole in my heart and I can't heal.
Right.
And I literally felt like I heard God say, and therein lies the principle of redemption, of repentance. If there's no repentance, there's no turning around, right? And with that comes humility and asking for forgiveness and all that, ourselves and others.
Yeah.
There is no redemption. So there's no hope of redeeming a situation. So I think it's beautiful how this boy was young and foolish and whatever. He was mortified with what he did to you. But here you are 4, 5, 6 years later.
Yeah.
And he meets you at the airport.
Yeah.
And I just love to hear that there was an actual, I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Would you forgive me?
He absolutely did that. And neither of us were believers. I guess
but the principles apply, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, I found out later on, though, that he grew up in a family that they were church going. Right?
Oh, okay.
So
he was a person of faith.
Yeah, he had some of that there, even though he wasn't really walking it when we were best friends,
And you were kind of growing up in the streets a little bit, just doing your own thing.
Yeah, I was kind of doing my own thing, but I was aware of God, and I was aware of the power of what that was about, especially when you get involved with drugs. You realize there are different sides of the spiritual realm that you're dealing with.
Yeah.
Right. And so
I hear that all the time.
Oh yeah, it's very real. So he did all of that. Look, the guy was my best friend, right? So obviously we had so much in common, still surfing and things like that, and so. So
in short order, you meet your wife. She's a lovely,
after I came to Christ, woman. I actually, when I was living with Mike, is when I accepted Christ, because that's when I really knew. When I found out the girl I'd come back for didn't really want anything from me, I changed my life because I was going to stay in Hawaii forever, right? And at that point, there was breaking, right? Even though I was with Mike, and Mike really helped a lot with me during that time because he saw the pain that I had gone through, and he knew about that also, right? So
there's a number of breakings, isn't there?
Yeah,
there's just a number of breakings in life, and it's you wonder, what's that final break? What's it going to take for that final break to really bring me to my knees? To see my own depravity and my brokenness, and wait, I was meant for more than this. And
Yeah.
So you started going to church.
I started going to church, and you got involved with that. And there's one thing that I always knew. I always knew I could not marry someone I met at the bar. Mm-hmm. That the good women were at church. Mm-hmm. Where I got that, I don't know. Mm-hmm. And that might not even be true, but it was true to me at the time.
Yeah. It's that quiet, still voice that says, wait, you're not going to find what you need behind a bar.
Yeah.
Especially with the life you'd had and the experiences you'd had partying and in the drug culture. I have discovered that God shows up in amazing ways at bars too. But I love that.
Oh, He protected me the whole time.
Totally, He protected you. And intuitively, you knew that for
stories.
Yeah.
He has a lot.
I could tell you some stories that would blow and make your skin crawl, but God was there.
So you met Nancy.
And I came into church. And that whole story is very funny. But I came in that morning, and I remember the church was, the guy who brought me there took me there because he told me that there was a lot of women at this church, right? but I had been praying that morning, Lord, tell me where you want me. Mm-hmm. So God used this guy that went to that church because of the women, but God also took me where He wanted me.
It's amazing.
And so I show up there. Sure, the place was full of women, and one of them being my now wife, right? Yeah. And I saw her and her little bow and her hand raised, and man, I'm going, who is that? Right? But I wasn't there for that. I was there because God was teaching me how to be a man. Okay? I was asking, Lord, make me into the man that you want me to be for my wife, right? I was ready, right? I was done.
Yeah, life can be exhausting.
Yeah, and I was exhausted.
And life does become a battlefield when you do things your way, mm-hmm. and you try to find satisfaction in things that you know are taking you down. It's exhausting.
Yeah.
So you saw her, and it's make me a man.
Yeah. It was funny because God took away the marijuana pipe and gave me a sword. And so that's when I realized I was more of a warrior for Him than anything else. And so it was just like God prepare me, mm-hmm. right?
Yeah, and you became a warrior for life. It almost like you were looking for the life of your own heart somewhere.
Yeah.
In something, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's something.
Yeah.
He took my pipe and gave me a sword. There's a T-shirt.
I like that. A slogan.
That's wonderful. Yeah. And you never looked back.
No, not at all. It's funny too, because when I met my wife, she actually liked my roommate. It was a wonderful man named Pete Melody, and he was the youth pastor, and I was, his assistant. I kind of left Mike behind because Mike didn't want to walk with God. I wanted to walk with God. Believe it or not, he's walking with God now. But no, I had moved away from Mike because he still kind of wanted to, stay with the whole drug.
Yeah.
And I didn't want that anymore. It was so empty to me.
And once you have a transformational experience with the other side of darkness, which is light, it's really, you can't go back. You don't want, it's not that you can't, you don't want to go back.
No.
Now, that was a season of life, certainly, but then you got married and you began to plant and seed and learn together.
Yes.
So you began to really explore and experiment and enjoy what you really didn't have growing up.
Right.
Well, and learning as fast as you could, because within 2-3 years, I was coming along.
2 years. Yeah, 2 years after we got married. Yeah.
Being a parent is tough. And children expose, I think, they're like a mirror to us in so many ways, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I know raising Natalie, and she was amazing. Now he's an amazing girl. But at the same time, as she became an individual, it took you into yet another season of life, which was a lot of the things you ran from or you hid from or you didn't deal with growing up. She begins to expose.
Right.
And so that pilgrimage into rest, by the way, we talk a lot about what that looks like, peeling back the layers to say, wait a minute, what are all these pieces of the puzzle that make up my life? Yeah. So what was that like? Besides humbling.
Yeah, it was very humbling. And again, it goes back to you only do what you know and you only know what you learn. Right? And I did not learn how to be a dad. Mm-hmm. So I was on the job training, right?
Yeah, and it is.
And I want a relationship with my daughter, right? I want that, right?
And you want the one you didn't have.
Yes. Yeah. Right. But the thing about being a parent is sometimes you find yourself wanting to live through them. Mm-hmm. And so expectations get in the way. Right.
Unreasonable expectations.
Yeah. And you can't do that. You can't do that because they have their own life and they have their own way, and you've got to accept that and move on, right? And enjoy the successes.
Yeah, and that's another complicated process, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
We have to die to ourselves. I mean, we've got to be honest with ourselves and really die to a lot of our expectations for another person, knowing that I had my go of it. But something you said that really struck me, how in life you have to teach yourself how to learn. You have to teach yourself how to train sometimes.
Yes. Yeah.
Because your parents did the best they could, but they didn't know.
Well, yeah, they only did what they knew.
Right.
Yeah.
But what we don't have to teach ourselves sometimes is how to fight. But it's important to learn to fight well, right? To show up like a warrior. And your fight used to be the pipe. But like you said, I exchanged my pipe for the sword, which is the whole counsel of the Word of God.
Yeah.
And it's living, and it's real, and it's powerful. We're going to do a whole segment on the theology of rest. But it's really an amazing thing to see you two sitting here together in a room. And has it been 3 years?
Since what?
Since I met you? 2 years?
No, it's been 2, yeah.
2 years. But the work is swift.
Yeah.
Swift. Deliberate, intentional, and swift. If people show up and are willing to roll up their sleeves.
That's the key right there. You got to be willing, right?
Yeah.
And if there's anything that I've really learned, it's how hard-headed I can be. And Natalie knows.
I got it from you.
Yeah.
Natalie knows.
Yes,
so.
you share that in common, I might add.
Yeah.
But when you said hard-headed, it was funny because I wanted you to talk about, you're a very strong person. You've got the heart of a warrior. And now our listening audience can see why to some extent. And I know you're very diplomatic in how you address things and discuss things. And I appreciate that. But at the end of the day, you were pretty much on your own, and it was fight or die.
Die, yeah.
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 And there were numerous situations where that could have broken you, but somehow God in His sovereignty sustains you through it. But you know what impacted me about you is you were very stubborn and very skeptical, and you didn't trust. And I'll never forget saying, Jay, with everything you've gone through and this narrative that, that I'm looking at here, and all these papers you filled out, and just listening to you and watching you and hearing the things you're saying. I always say I hear with my senses, right?
Right.
But I listen with my heart.
Yes.
So seeing the disparity between how you were living and the weight of the things that your brain and your body were carrying. You have this beautiful life now in Orange County, like I said, a house, a wife, and everything. But the body keeps the score. And the narrative of all these experiences that your body was carrying and how your brain was operating, I could see was in conflict with your deepest convictions. And I could just see you were tired. And I'll never forget, after you finished Cereset, I recommended you to the Cereset office.
Yes.
And I'll never, ever forget the look in your eyes. I was, oh no. Where'd Jay go? Because you were so peaceful and relaxed.
Yeah, it was amazing, that whole experience.
You put your sword down, I think,
amazing.
A little bit. It was amazing.
Yeah, it was definitely different than what I thought it would be, Well, I mean, initially I thought electroshock, right?
Yeah.
I mentioned that earlier, but I'm completely different.
You're completely different.
My whole demeanor, I don't feel like I'm fighting.
When the brain goes into that deep state of relaxation, right? And it's a technology that uses and employs an acoustic mirroring system. So the same thing that happens when you look at yourself in the mirror, for lack of better resources right now to break it down. But what do? Intuitively, you optimize your appearance.
You fix yourself.
Right? You fix yourself up. And the brain does that itself for yourself. So it's nothing artificial that we do to you. But I got to tell you, it was an amazing thing to witness. It was like you found the resources you've been looking for all your life to live the life you wanted.
That's exactly
Is it?
Yeah, it was funny because when...
That's what I saw.
Yeah.
But describe that.
Yeah, when you were explaining about how it worked, it made complete sense to me. you know? And so that's why I was willing to go into it, because I think you need to have, your mindset needs to be, I want to do this. Yeah. It's not someone's making me do this, right? And in the beginning, that's kind of like how I felt. I felt like, you know, okay, I'll just do this, right? But when it was explained to me, that's when I said, oh yeah, I want to do this. I think that has a lot to do with everything in life.
Yeah, it's like a massage.
You have to,
a massage could benefit you, right?
And
because you have knots all over. Would you like to get rid of your knots?
Right, exactly. This is what was really amazing to me, I think, and the most I got out of it was the way I was able to sleep.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's it. Number one.
Because you tend to wrestle. And when you're asleep, you really wrestle, and you don't know you're wrestling, you're wrestling.
Yeah, and you're not having restful sleep, right?
Right. You're wrestling instead of resting.
That's right.
So, but that's what it was, but with Cereset. And I think it was my second session that I really experienced the deepest part of the transformation. I haven't been the same since, huh?
No.
Yeah. Except for the slight twitch I've got. Other than that, I'm kidding.
But I also want to say, look at all the reconciliation of the soul, the mind, the heart, the will, the conscience, the feelings of your life, and spiritually. Mm-hmm. Look at all that had transpired in those areas. So the brain came easy.
Yeah.
You know, there's all kinds of modalities we can recommend people do and we employ that aren't as effective and transformational because people aren't willing to do the hard work of the soul, of the mind, the heart, the will, the conscience, the feelings, and saying, what am I doing with my life? I'm hurting myself. I'm hurting people. I'm going nowhere.
Right.
And this is going to end. I want to live with integrity.
Right.
So because we did all that work, right? And you had done a lot of it with, like you said, on your own pilgrimage and with God.
Yes.
By the time you came in here, you're like, even though you were skeptical, it's like, okay, I'm willing to look at this if this is one of my last frontiers. And in fact, for you, it really was.
Absolutely. And again, it comes back to testimony, because I saw the change in Natalie, too.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah,
not that she needed a lot to change. I mean, there really wasn't all that much to change, but there was. But when you see it, right? And that's what...
Yeah, you go, holy crap.
Yeah, I was like, what happened?
But Natalie was an athlete. Natalie, most people don't know this about you. You're an incredible athlete. You were very gifted.
Yeah.
15 years.
13, yeah.
13, yeah. And you had multiple concussions.
Oh, I had over 10 by the time I was 21. It was very gnarly. But yeah.
She likes to bang her head. She's a headbanger.
I'm a headbanger. I was in the punk scene for a little bit.
But it was transformational for you.
Oh, 1,000%. Not just to the point of, fixing all the stuff that happened with the concussions. Like my sight alone was affected from the concussions, and that fixed that, and I was not expecting that at all. But I mean, the increased self-awareness, especially, and because I was in such a high state of fight or flight all the time, my mom always said that I should be a lawyer because I was very argumentative. And I already got the hard-headed from Dad, right? So I'm getting easily triggered and easily frustrated by tiny things. I'd kind of just build up over time, and then I just kind of explode. And I was once described as a hurricane by someone that I was dating. The end of that relationship real quick. But it brought me back down. I'm no longer in a state of fight or flight all the time. It's the same thing that Dad described, when you're actually able to rest and you're not wrestling with yourself or with others around you. And it's honestly hard to describe. You really have to experience it yourself, because every single person's different. Every single brain is different.
But something like a brain that's not balanced can make life feel like a constant battleground. Yeah. And it doesn't have to be that way. One of my dreams is to get kids in here sooner than later and get families. There isn't a single person that I know that couldn't benefit from it. Because whether you're a pleaser, whether you're disengaged and you're an avoider, whether you can be a vacillator and like flip quickly, or a controller, or tend to be very compliant. Generally, yes, there are the attachment issues, but they do manifest very specifically in how our brain works. So I know we didn't mean to go that route, but it's such an incredible... I get so excited about every time I look at you, Jay, or I talk to you, because you are not the same person. And like I said, I saw what it did for Natalie as well. It was transformational.
Yeah, and I've had that same comment from other people who've known me, even my mom.
Yeah.
You're different. And literally those words, you're at rest.
They're at rest, yeah.
So, yeah.
And these seasons of life have significant impact on our lives and how our brain adapts to cope, right?
Right.
Yeah.
The workarounds our brain develops to cope. And it's certainly, we're about rest here. We're about reconciling conflict. You have an amazing story, and I appreciate the diplomacy and the sensitivity with which you shared some things. But at the end of the day, those of you who are listening to us have this brief conversation, we just want to encourage you that you don't have to live like everything's a constant battle. And getting out of bed is impossible. You can step into a place of rest and heal and reconcile, and that's what we're about.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me come today. And again, who am I that I'd have a story, but everyone's got one, right? And I think it's important, the work that you do, that you bring to light. It's not just the famous people that have stories. We all have one, right? Each and every person, each and every soul.
We talk about how we need to lock arms, we need to stand together, we need to become instruments of healing in each other's lives. And thank you so much. Your story it's really meaningful to me personally, and I've seen the consequence of this in your entire family. And so thank you so much, Jay.
You bet. Thank you.
Thank you, Dad.
You bet you did.
All right, everyone. Don't forget, our next day of rest is going to be local in Newport Beach, California on February 26th. There are still a few weeks left to register, and everything is on the website for you. For updates about REST and this podcast, please visit our Instagram or Facebook, The Place of Rest. If you'd like more information about Virginia or to support and join the cause of REST, please go to virginiadixon.com/collaborate. Thank you for listening to Rest with Virginia Dixon. We'll see you next week. Cereset is a non-invasive neuro-technology that Virginia commonly refers her clients to. If you would like more information about Cereset, please call the Cereset-Irvine office at 949-407-9020, or if you're listening from outside our area, please visit cereset.com for a location near you.